Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Biblio Fitness. I do hope everyone's had a great day, made some spectacular gains. Today is a rest day for yours truly, but we continue on with the training. Um, I guess before I continue on with Stirner's book, it's been recent. I don't know if inevitably I'm gonna have to take a break, but my I'm gonna be really honest with you guys. My drive for training has diminished greatly recently, and I'm not sure why. I'm not exhausted. I feel great, but just my interest has deviated substantially from training. I don't even watch training videos, to be quite honest with you. Most of the time, I'm like, dude, I've already seen this before. How many times are you gonna hit me with the same cookie cutter clickbait video title of, these 5 exercises you need to build your chest and all that ridiculousness that goes along with those sort of clickbait titles and captions. But I've just been like really diving into like a nerd into like international relations and politics, philosophy, history, and I rarely really ever put my mind to training. Training has really taken a back seat. Um, that's it's bizarre. I don't know if I need to take a break, but I do train. But it's there's not that same fervor. There's not that same motivation. But I still do what I have to do. Because at the end of the day, I'm not trying to be small. Working out, and I believe in maintaining a rigid resistance training program helps a lot, and I'm going to keep it in place. But it's interesting how I'm starting to realize how interests and everything is starting to change before my eyes. It seems like daily, but I'm still gonna keep it. Now that I'm thinking about it, because I don't want to be like everybody else, just standing around. I believe that yes, it's good to train the mind, but keeping the body intact and doing resistance training, following progressive overload, and all that stuff is very beneficial as well. So, as they say, just because you're not motivated doesn't mean you don't. It's not an excuse to not do the work. So, but to the main spiel of today's video, I've read a bit of Stirner's The Ego and Its Own. As I said in the previous video, one can see where the inspiration is beginning to, where the inspiration is drawn from regarding to Nietzsche and stuff like elite theory, as I said. Because, in the previous video I did talk about, like in the beginning, he discusses the 3 stages of man. Child, the youth, and the adult, and the different behaviors attached to those 3 different eras of man. And as he has now begun with this book, it's now translating into our own history, philosophical history, or endeavor and transformation, evolutions as such. And he puts it within that same framework, which is pretty good. I like it. Very, very, very clear and concise. He's a fan of sophism. That school has always been highly debated on its use and such. But I guess it depends on whether you're moral or not. But yeah, he goes and begins with I mean, he doesn't really talk about the pre-Socratics. He goes straight into the Periclean age. Pericles, the first citizen of Athens, and the philosophy that started coming up during that time, where he makes the claim that sophism was making ridicule of what people used to take very seriously. We started questioning our relations, I mean, not we, but I mean, we as a general mankind, but these gentlemen back then were beginning to question the relationship to the gods, the relationship to the world, the relationship to society. Things that were usually held sacred and beyond the scope of argumentation, right? These holy things, and people started questioning. And with the beginning of sophism, he makes the claim that there started to develop a break of the mind from the earth, from the world, right? Like, you know, we started become skeptical and cynical about, you know, why is family so important? Why is the state so important? Why is my function within the state so absolute and important? Or whether there is any gods, or, you know, what it is to be good, what it is to be bad, you know. And with regards to sophism, it started developing an individual's ability, or allows a person to develop the abilities to justify their actions that is beneficial to them. You know, good is relative. It's always been relative. And I like how you just mix that distinction from the very beginning. Good. And how can I, you know, and as a sophist, how can I use the commanding of language and my dialectical skills and so forth to be able to justify my actions? You know what I'm saying? Like how Epictetus states in on his discourses, we never, as humans, don't, you know, we always go towards the good and leave from the bad. And the problem is always trying to figure out what the fuck those two words are and what they mean and what they signify, and as whether these terms can be ever universal, given, you know, the circumstances that distinguishes each individual. But with sophism, that started coming about. But then here comes Socrates, the first ethic man, or the man that to bring about ethics. He says it's not just about knowing what you want, and, you know, just doing what is good for you. And you have to go beyond that. You have to look at something bigger. You have to chase something that is outside of yourself. That your actions and your philosophy has to go towards something good, a good for all. That's how you should, you know, that's how you should quantify, or that's how you should look at and criticize your actions, like whether you are doing the good thing or bad thing. Can't just be completely related to you and your biases, considering that we're very flimsical when it even comes to that, right? What is good one day is bad in another day, which is another fucking sign that there is no such thing as absolute truths. Something that people gloss over all the time, and this was an observation made aware by, you know, that by Nietzsche, is like, you know, people consider this one action to be good, but in the different circumstances they villainize it. You know, there is not even any coherency or consistency on what these metrics are, and they flip-flop all the time. But yeah, with Socrates became started the whole endeavor of ethics, right? This greater common good that we all have to get behind. And a very interesting phrase that Stirner likes to use is that the ancients, he calls them the ancients, the pre-Christians, he calls them the ancients, the children in this evolution of man's thinking. He says that, you know, with reason, with the bringing about of reason, you know, it was a truth whose untruth they try to get behind, and eventually did, because, you know, and this is related a lot to Nietzsche, right? That even reason, logic, dialectic, and rhetoric, these are all built on unreason, on illogical foundations, right? These are things that we have taken or assumed to be true. Doesn't have any evidence, but we assume them to be true in order to create or construct this framework in which we all can get behind. A truth whose untruth we eventually did get behind. And that was with reason, right? And with the wave of sophism and skepticism and things of that nature, there became different branches of this reason, trying to find reason, trying to get above the world mentally. And then later on, so the separation of mind is already coming about from the world. Then came the skeptics, who used the heart, you know, and with Socrates, the purity of heart came about, right? Because the only way that you could get to the good now, in with the way that he set it up, is that you have to be unemotional. It has to be value-free. It can't be regards to you. So the only way you could do that is purifying your heart. Your heart has to be in the right place to find this good that is not just related to you, but related to the best for everybody. You know, that's one of the big messages that we get all the time, right? That's beaten into our heads from the moment of conception or, birth, is that you have to sacrifice your own self for the greater good. You have to come at it with a pure heart. You have to relinquish your emotions and your attachments in order to make the necessary sacrifices. It's a message that's always thrown out and thrown in our faces all the time. But yeah, with this development came the skeptics who now targeted the heart. Why should my heart be attached to family, to society, to the state, to anybody really? Shouldn't it be what my heart feels? How my heart feels towards these people? Shouldn't that be more important? He starts making, the way that he writes it is that separation that it was required in order for the invention of the spirit to come about, something that is completely separate from the body. And dualism started taking into place. Dualism of mind and body is so integral in so many religions, so many philosophies, that there is a distinction between me and the inner me, or the me above me, the spirit that is not attached, that is not restrained by the whims and the disadvantages that come with being a human, or how we are attached to the world, and how the world affects us, and how we're just trying as much as we can to control that, to mitigate the chaos that is ensued by the world on a daily basis. That shift started coming about. And he also talks about how it's different from Christians even in philosophy, because like you take Stoics for example, it's still attached to the world. How do we react to the realities of the world that we live in? There is no ideal in Socratic, not Socratic, in Stoicism. I lost it for a second there, my apologies. But for Stoicism, right, there is no ideal to chase. It is just to be a practical philosophy, a practical man. For Greeks, what was it to be good? To be healthy, to be beautiful, to have good social networks and friends and things of that nature. Very attached to the whims of the world, right? Very attached to what the world brings for us, to how we interact with the world, based upon these structures, these social structures. We are social animals, right? And with Stoicism, there is no ideal, there is no repudiation, there is no revulsion against the world like you do with Christianity. Like you see with Christianity, right, that the world is evil, the world is in error, the world is corrupt and rotten, and that's why we're oppressed. But we'll get to that. I'm sure many people already know where that goes. It's a very interesting point. And then he goes on to Christianity from this, and that's in regards to, the child era of our development, right? That we want to know about the world, the truth about the world. We're very curious to see what's behind it. What makes these things, what is this all about? That was the endeavor of reason, trying to rationalize this very chaotic world. And no longer needing gods hidden under every corner to somehow rationalize, right? Trying to use our thoughts to try to internalize and be able to bring about that reason from within. Even though I don't even believe that's an appropriate description, but we'll leave it there. But then here come along the Christians, who, in this development of the spirit, and Stirner makes the case that there was no thoughts, there was no thinking the way that we think nowadays, because he corresponds thoughts with spirit. And the ancients, as he calls them, weren't really thinking. They were still very influenced by the world. They were still influenced on how to deal with the world, but there was no ideal taking place. There was no these deep thoughts that were starting to separate them from the world, until what he calls Christian moderns, what he calls people the moderns, right? With that taking place, and I really do like it. Like, I know I'm jumping back and forth, but he says that, because with the endeavor of reason, underlying that endeavor was the ancients' desperate need or desperate desire to separate, to conquer the world, to overcome the world of the senses and the limitations of the senses. You know, that's a big thing made by Plato, that we are restricted by our senses, and therefore we can never see the noumenon, the real world. We're always going to be hindered. And God came about because of that. That was the ideal. That was the culmination of that feeling, that drive, that frustration. This God, this conqueror of the world and the senses, something that overcomes the world and brings about a new evaluation of things. And with Christians, this obviously comes about, and then we enter the second phase of youth, of idealism, where I love how he says that, you know, we live in a haunted house. We live in a world that is possessed. We live in a world now where thoughts overcome everything, right? Where our lives are not, the standards of living is no longer attached or in regards to our social standing or to our physical beauty. These things are now repudiated, and you know, these things are now no longer considered as valid or no longer considered as necessary, because the spirit, the thoughts, the ideas are all that matters. What is behind these ideas? What is behind these endeavors? What is behind this action, this object, whatever the case may be? That's what truly matters. And he talks about Descartes, right? I think, therefore I am. And that's when we started the importance of worldly objects, started diminishing, right? We didn't care about such things. We don't care about such things. We don't care about the poverty that will inevitably ensue, but because of our focus on spiritual endeavors, of thoughts, of ideas, and the purity of these ideas and where they stem from and how they can, be inputted into the real world. And, and we do live in a house in the world that is possessed, in a haunted house. I like the analogy that he throws in there, because we see spirits in everything, right? Behind the wind, there has to be something. On the river, oh my God, it gives me a spirit of yearning or mourning. Or I wake up in the morning breeze, gives me a spirit of yearning and longing and whatever the fuck it may be. We look at a picture and what does this mean and what ideas? It's not the picture that's important. It's not the portrait that's important, but the feelings, the ideas that surface from looking at that portrait. We're looking at a pale facade, at a pale world now. And the spirits, the ghosts are what matters. Very, very astute observation. I really do like that. Our overt emphasis on things that don't exist. Things, the material world is not good enough for us, because we reject the world, because we look at outside and we're like, I don't want this to be my reality. So I'm going to create a world where the spirit reigns supreme, where the spiritual and all these things are what's important, even though it's never going to come about, right? It doesn't do anything for you. You're still in the real world. But you could see that desperate separation from the mind, the spirit, and the world coming about, and why it came about, right? People don't want to deal with the suffering of it. People don't want to deal with the inequality that is just seemingly innate with the human experience. So we go to the spiritual world, where we create our own fantasies. And where we can create our own fantasies, because who can possibly reject it? You don't need reason, whatever the fuck that is, but you don't need evidence. You don't need works to substantiate and to validate your thinking or your ideas. It's just something that you feel from your heart. And if you don't even know where it comes from, it has to be pure. It has to be from God, which is, fucking mental gymnastics that we play on each other all the time. But I just love how he's making a very easy conceptualization of how we have transitioned our way of thinking. And, with Christianity, even the fact that we are starting to separate ourselves from Christian thoughts, we are still very spiritual. We're still very Christian. Instead of trying to get to heaven, we're now trying to bring heaven on earth. And he's like, even for you ardent atheists, for example, he says, you're still spiritual. You still think of mankind. You still think of values that are needed in order for a person to be at their very best in terms of productivity and function or utility to the rest of mankind. That's a lot with socialism. That is socialism, right? Bringing heaven on earth, a man being all of these values, a good little bitch or a good effeminized human being. These are all ideals. These are all values that we have now placed above ourselves. It's still the same thing as God. It's just no longer use the word God, but we're still very spiritual. We're still very ideal. And we're still in that youthful phase where we see how ugly the world is. Now we see the world that is ugly because of the separation. Now we have to instill our ideals to bring out the world from the blacklist, from non grata, and to make it more spiritual so we can live in it peacefully, because we know we can't leave it. You know, even though we now claim that we don't care about what happens to the world and the possessions, because we know our spirit is immortal, and we know our spirit is going to outlast our bodies, outlast the stars and the earth and all these things. That's why our emphasis has been so much on this. And even in this new modern world, we still cling on to those ideals. You know we haven't come back to the practical just yet. Most of us probably never will. But I really do like how it's a fucking amazing already. It's amazing, right? I'm already only in like page 40, and I love his little thing. All things are nothing to me. God and mankind are no concern to me, because I'm not God or mankind. And he even talks about egoism, or the ego, you know, the egotistic, the man, you know, that there is a separation, because even those who claim to be an atheist, they despise the individual that is able to mesh the spiritual and the material together and do what they deem to be the best. Because even now, idealists is like, they villainize you and they call you an egoist if you take your personal considerations into account before this metaphysical endeavor that we're all supposedly getting behind. You know, this endeavor to bring about heaven on earth, even though it'll never happen. But we always have to have this idea that we're striving at, that is over and above us, over and above the world, and over and above our relations to the world. And we're not consistently focusing most of our energies on that ideal framework. We're selfish. But, you know, in the very beginning of the introduction, Stirner makes a very, you know, I think a very astute point, is we worship egoists. You know, the pinnacle of society are egoists. They're the ones that instill the laws and the values and all these things that make the person what they need them to be in society, but they don't do it either. They don't follow something over them the way that we do. You know, he makes the case with God. Like God is love and justice, and that's something that we have to strive for all the time. But does God chase any alien sacred endeavor like we do? No. And he even talks about sacred. You know, sacred has to be alien. Sacred has to be something away from yourself. It has to be unknown to you, because it's not you, because you're still chasing it, right? And it's not you because you don't have those qualities, and you don't have that thinking. So it has to be something that's completely alien, unrelated to you, unknown to you, and it makes you uncomfortable. You know, that these ideals, these chasing after ideals all the time, this wanting to be something above yourself. And he makes that case like, you know, you may be an atheist, but if you're still having an idea that's over you, you're still the same shit. You're still a pious person. You know, you're no different than the most ardent Christian who are still living their lives with this bullshit ideal hanging over their head. And that's how they measure every single one of their actions to this ideal that just never happens. That never is going to happen. It's never going to come to fruition. But it's something that we all have to get behind to be good people. You know, this social contract, this social lie that we all have to get behind. And that's why I feel like people are so ardent that everyone has to believe what they believe in order to validate their beliefs. So you can tell that this book is quite, it's going to be it's a fucking amazing book. Like, I'm sure I missed some, but it's amazing, man. I'm glad that, I believe it was Semigod, great channel on YouTube. He also has a channel on Odyssey. that he's the one I brought this about when he was talking about, you know, socialism is eugenics and stuff like that. Definitely check that channel out. Is he's a very erudite gentleman, you know. But I'm gonna keep reading after this. I did not know I was gonna take this long, but guys, get on this. If you're a fan of Nietzsche, you'll definitely be a fan of this. Yeah, that'll be all for today. Quite a lot to unpack, but it's very enjoyable. I do hope you have a great day. I hope you all make some amazing gains. And till next time, guys, love you all. Peace.